Hi there, friends. Welcome back to the Meaningless Podcast. I'm Pastor Tim, here with my buddy Ian.
Hey, how
Ian,
you
good
doing?
morning.
Good morning or good evening for me, maybe.
Yeah. You changed jobs recently, Ian. You're working nights now.
Yeah, I'm doing overnights stocking at the supermarket, and it's so good because I could just kind of meditate and come up with my own system, listen to music the whole time, and basically get paid to listen to albums, podcasts. Maybe I can listen to our podcast, kind of.
There you go.
Sometimes I do the editing for these, so sometimes when I go back, I look and I'm like, oh man, I had something really good there that I wish I could expand upon. So it's always kind of good to go, and then like same thing. It led me back to reminding me of something from last time, and when we did, what was it, chapter 6? So yeah,
hmm
it's good to have
Yeah.
that kind of freedom, and yeah, it's going pretty good.
Yeah. So for me, obviously,
Mm.
we are recording in according to the clock in the morning for me, your evening. And then, yeah, listener, whenever you're listening to this, you're listening
Excuse
to
me.
it on your drive to from work. You're listening to it just at home doing dishes, whatever it is. Uh, Yeah, this is the Meaningless Podcast. It's a podcast where we consider what God has done to look ahead into this chapter of Ecclesiastes that we're going to read. That's chapter 7, verse 13. Ian and I were talking about this just before recording. I remarked on last time when we looked at 6. This is going to sound, if you're familiar with the book of Proverbs, like the book of Proverbs, where it's these sort of balanced little sayings, sort of two-part. An assertion is made, and then a counter or a foil or a contrast is asserted alongside it. Um,
Mhm.
all of which is meant to offer us some wisdom and some
Well, I
yeah.
think, you said wisdom, which is kind of the perfect word for this because, I mean, even the heading is just wisdom, right? That's
hmm
the only word there. And
yeah.
then, this is kind of this theme that he has through here and through Proverbs between like the wise man and the fool. And, getting right into it in the beginning, I mean, he says something like a good name is better than fine wine, right? And we talked about in 6, like, what benefit does a poor man have that knows how to behave himself? So I think, when he's talking about wisdom, maybe we're not thinking about like, just like intelligence or something like that, but more of like, we're talking about it too, all in the beginning with these cycles, right? Like with the different seasons and all the times and, the God's sovereignty. Like, really, the wisdom is when to do something, how to do something, how to say something, right? That prudence, if you want to use that word. I think
hmm
I think Christians do like to use that word a lot, prudence.
it's a
Kind of,
good
yeah,
that's a
good.
good word that brings across in a way what Hebrew means when it says wisdom. This idea
Hmm.
of
Making the
wisdom.
right choice in the right time.
Yes, wisdom is an active thing
Mm-hmm.
in biblical sense. It's not just the ability to say something so wise sounding, like we might say in English, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I've wow, he just has such thoughtful things to say. He's so wise.
Yeah, or a wisecrack.
A wise crack. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. We like to use that word in English also to mean right, the smart aleck kind of thing.
Sarcastic, smart aleck. Me, I was always like that.
Yeah, it's in a way too. We talk about sometimes how biblically the word love is not just an emotional word. It's not just, ooh, I've got the warm fuzzies, I see that special someone and I get
Mm-hmm.
the butterflies in my stomach. That's love. No, in a biblical sense, love is an active um, attitude. It's an
Yeah,
attitude in which I look at someone and I desire to do what is good for them, and in
yeah.
fact, I go ahead and do that. And wisdom, yeah, is this idea. Not only do I know what's smart, what's prudent, what's apt in the moment, but I follow through. I do.
Yeah, and I think the good thing, just to go on that little point about love, is that I think it's kind of inverted the meaning in society now. When we say we love somebody, we mean like, what do they do for me?
Mm-hmm.
They make me feel complete. You make me feel whole. Like, how do you make me feel? As opposed to, like you said, love is this active thing where we're going out and doing the thing out of love for somebody, and not just saying, "Oh, I love you," and then not doing anything, or only loving somebody when they benefit you, whether it's it could be a friend romantically, whatever. So I think that's a good thing to consider as well too.
Absolutely. Well, this is a good chapter for
Yeah.
some active, um, and so I think probably our comments here are maybe just going to be more rather than a whole flow of thought. There's a lot more kind of pieces of wisdom,
Mhm.
thoughtful things that Solomon has for us. I want to take just one moment because the word is in this section to remind listeners ourselves like why we chose to call this the Meaningless Podcast. This first section of scripture that we're considering, we're looking through the book of Ecclesiastes, which starts off with that assertion: everything's meaningless, 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 says the teacher. Um, it's this, it's meaning things are meaningless on two levels in a sense. I can't guarantee that things will work out the way I want them to in this life. I can work hard all my life, but maybe my ventures just won't succeed, or if they do, I'll die and my heirs might squander my hard work, the fruits of my labors. And so things are sort of meaningless in that sense. But that doesn't actually make my work meaningless. There's still great meaning to what we do. However, if we try and earn favor before God on the basis of our works, if we try and say, oh, I'm going to be such a good employee, such a good business owner, such a good whatever, I'm going to try and change the world, etc., and that I'll earn God's favor by that, that's meaningless.
Glory. That's
Yeah,
theology
worldly
glory,
glory.
man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can do it, right? That self-identification. And that always goes to back, kind of the theme that I like to bring up throughout kind of the podcast was, the difference between our God-given identity and role and purpose and then our self-created one, and that goes back
Yes.
to Eden. That was the fall. That was man choosing to define himself and not stay within, kind of submit, if you will say, to his God-given role. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of cool how all those things are always kind of like circling back here with the Ecclesiastes.
Yeah. So, yeah, meaningless, not in the sense of like, hey, the Bible is meaningless or the things that we are going to say we intend to be meaningless, but we want to strip away, like you said, Ian, kind of self-created meaning,
Mm-hmm.
self-created identity, and see how meaningless those things are, and instead focus on, yeah, the identity we have in Christ by the grace of God, and um, then the meaning that engaging in life from
Mm-hmm.
that foundation
Yeah,
has. Well, I
cool.
think that's a great setup to our chapter 7
Mm.
here. We're about halfway through the book of Ecclesiastes. There's 13, right? 13
Oh man,
chapters, the way that
we're already that
Ecclesiastes is.
far.
12. Yeah, we're over the
Uh,
halfway point.
cool.
Um, so good to review. Um,
Yeah, I think
usually,
I pick up on the reading this time.
are you on the reading? Yeah, I was going to say. I thought that I had perhaps done. So, Ian,
I think
go
you
ahead
did
and
it
read.
twice.
Yeah, all,
Sorry.
all good. Go ahead and
I'll
read
have to make up
Ecclesiastes
for it.
chapter 7 for us, folks.
Sure.
We're whatever Bible you've got at home, Ian's going to be reading for us.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the NIV here. Yeah, so the heading for this one, of course, is wisdom. This is the main heading. Um, and this is going to be the whole thing. You're going to hear wisdom again and again and again through this. So again, it goes back to Proverbs. That was a big topic of Proverbs. So wisdom versus the foolishness or being the fool. So yeah, so I'll take a quick read. So wisdom. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death better than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, for death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. Frustration is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. Is it better to heed the rebuke of a wise person than to listen to the song of fools? Like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools. This too is meaningless. Extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. Wisdom like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter, as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this: wisdom preserves those who have it. Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider this: God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. It is meaningless in this meaningless life of mine. I have seen both of these: the righteousness perishing in their wickedness, in their righteousness, the wicked living long in their wickedness. But do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. Wisdom makes one wise person more powerful than 10 rulers in a city. Indeed, there is no one on earth who is righteous, no one who does what is right and never sins. Do not pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you, for you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others. All this I tested by wisdom, and I said, I am determined to be wise, but this was beyond me. Whatever exists is far off and most profound. Who can discover it? So I turned my mind to understand, to investigate, and to search out wisdom and the scheme of things, and to understand the stupidity of wickedness and the madness of folly. I find more bitter than death the woman who is a snare, whose heart is a trap, and whose hands are chains. The man who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner she will ensnare. Look, says the teacher, this is what I have discovered. Adding one thing to another to discover the scheme of things, while I was still searching but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but no, not one upright woman among them all. This only have I found: God created mankind upright, but they have gone in search of many schemes. All right.
Ecclesiastes 7. Thanks for reading,
That
Ian.
was a heavy one.
There's
That
a
was a
lot in
heavy
there.
one, man.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
taken my own notes previously before we got on, and then even just as you're reading, um,
Yeah, I
there's
know.
things. And it's one of the nice things about having someone else read
Yeah, I
the
can't
Bible,
take
even just,
notes while I'm reading.
that's true. Well, and yeah, so that's helpful. But even I often find I can sit down and maybe even out loud read the Bible, and there's often a different experience reading something uh, out loud when you're reading
Yeah.
something in your head. But then even to just have someone else reading something out loud, often just the way that you the emphasis you put on a particular portion of a
Yeah.
verse or the pause that you take, I think, oh, there's that something else pops out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, this is kind of, there's a lot of patterns here. It's very rhythmic. I mean, like I said, it's less like prose. It's written more like poetry, right? It's supposed to
Hmm.
have like a stanza, a certain rhythm and a flow to it, amount of like a meter. So when I read this, I always think of like, like kind of the standard like English narrator, almost maybe sounds like Orson Welles kind of like North Atlantic kind of accent. So it has that rhythm to it, maybe a little you know, Renaissance Shakespeare or something, because that has the meter in it too. So um, when I study the Bible, you see all kinds of stuff, how like much detail they put into like composing. Like I remember
Hmm.
like Jonah, there was stuff in Jonah that was like 96 words and then a prayer and then like 96 words, like to make that like perfect amount of words. Like, so there's a lot of detail that goes into this. It's not just some guy scribbling it on his notepad. Well, maybe at this point in his life he's kind of you know brimming with wisdom, about to explode.
He
He's
just
got to
has to
get
get
it
it down.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, this is an
One of
interesting
those
one.
frantic nights kind of things. You just like get the inspiration, and it just kind of boom, do it.
Yeah, I see. I'll ask you, Ian, if there's a way that you would break down the verses that are, and again, we're using kind of an artificial schema when we read
Mm-hmm.
like this because Solomon didn't say, okay, this is chapter 7 now. You know, the numbers that we use, the chapters and the verses, those are later additions. But usually, and I would say the beginning of Ecclesiastes 7 is placed pretty well. It is
Mhm.
kind of a new section of what he's doing. Um, in your Bible, it might very well at home have chapter 8, the first verse there, kind of attached to the end of 7. And I think that's probably correct too.
Yeah, I think the RSV, NRSV that I use was like that.
Does that as well. Yeah,
Yeah, usually when I study though, because we both use NIV, I just use NIV on
use
the
that.
computer.
Sure. The way that I was looking at this, the portion that's broken apart in our Bibles into chapter 7 kind of
Hmm.
has three main topics that it walks through. The first one, just what I'm going to call memento mori, the need to remember our death.
It's
Um,
so funny that you said that because I thought of that too.
okay. And then the benefit of wisdom, kind of the middle section.
Hmm.
And then the last one I would just call maybe pragmatism. How how do I pragmatically, um, practically approach life?
Yeah.
Um, do you see any other like big theme in there?
Well,
Different
again,
ways to think of it?
I like to mention always is this kind of you have the comparison between the wise man and the fool constantly going back, and he really harps on this wisdom and foolishness kind of thing. But like, I feel like in a sense, like we gave the definition of somebody being wise is like knowing when or to do the right thing in the right moment or say the right thing or how to go about something, how to behave. Basically, that's what it comes down to. And this is what he's talking about right in the first part. A good name is better than fine perfume. I think one of the other things he says is like the fly in the ointment ruins the whole thing. So like having a good reputation, have the wise man is the one with a good name because even if he's poor, like we talked about in 6, he knows how to behave himself. He knows how to act properly around other people, and kind of live through that life as opposed to um, something more kind of superficial.
Mm,
Um,
hmm.
so I picked up on that, this whole kind of back and forth. But I always kind of laugh because I see kind of like when I think of foolishness, I think automatically of like Corinthians, right? Like the foolishness of the
Hmm.
cross, and like if we're fools for Christ and that whole kind of thing, like stumbling block for the Jews and foolishness to the Greeks, right? So like I'm thinking of that in the gospel, and I'm thinking of that here, and kind of trying to struggled a little bit sometimes to make sense of like, well, Solomon here is telling us to be wise, but then St. Paul's telling us to be fools for Christ. So,
Hmm.
where does that kind of where does the differentiation come in with that? I think that's a good question. Maybe we can kind of like try to explore throughout the rest of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, that is good. I would I would find probably the principal thing that we want to do. So yeah, to lay out what you're saying there. Ecclesiastes and these books of wisdom in the Old Testament are going to talk about foolishness is a bad thing. Like, don't be a fool. Don't be foolish. And then you go to the New Testament, and especially the Apostle Paul likes to talk about um, the foolishness of God, and that the message that we Christians preach is a message that seems like foolishness to people. Um, is does the Bible endorse foolishness or not? Are we fools or not? And really what we're talking about is
Fools for Christ.
yeah, what we're talking about is known in Lutheranism in particular. We talk about the distinction between law and gospel. Um, the law is the message throughout the Bible of how God wants us to live, um, and the promise Paul quotes in Romans, where he talks about, this is the message of the law. The one who does these things lives by them. If we follow God's law, we do sort of have the promise in a sense that we'll live, but more specifically, we have the threat. If we don't, we'll perish forever. That's the law. It's God's demands, commands for our lives, and what he tells us we will suffer for not fulfilling those. The gospel, separate message, is the promise that God has sent his son Jesus to win forgiveness on our behalf for us. And that message, yeah, the law and gospel are oppositional messages, they're foils. And the gospel in particular is what Paul is talking about when he's talking about foolishness, the
Yeah.
foolishness of God, right? Um, Ecclesiastes, more often than not, is a book of law, we would say. It's a book that talks about what God would have us do day by day in our lives. Um, and in that sense, we can see more naturally what's foolish and what's wise. Um, the gospel is an unnatural thing in a way. It comes outside the schema, the system of
Supernatural,
our.
if you will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe supernatural is a better word than unnatural. Yeah.
Right? It's beyond what we would consider normal or natural. So yeah,
Mhm.
I do like though that we both came up with the memento mori. That was kind of I think that was the big thing here. He really wanted to get home, and the thing in the beginning here. And I think it's kind of cool because I always think of like and it's kind of a theme throughout the Bible. But my personal experience too as a Christian is like I'm always put through like some kind of suffering or trial or test or something like that, if you will, like an experience that may seem like all is hopeless and all is lost, so that and kind of like he's saying, be in the house of mourning, so that when you have the received goods, like when something changes and it's better and you start getting these gifts back, or not back, but you start getting these gifts, like the amount of joy is like exponentially increased
Mm.
because you've experienced like the thing. So I always used to say, even before kind of my whole coming back to church and everything, I always used to say like, it's better you need to be a good artist, you need to like suffer, because to know what true beauty is, you need to see what's really ugly. Like if you know what true joy is, you need to know what suffering is. So I think that's kind of a little bit of what he's saying here, is that the awareness of kind of the finite nature, what we talked about, Havel, the wind, this meaningless kind of thing. The vanity was the other word that we use. um really kind of leads to it leads us astray, and what, as you would call, foolish behavior, right?
Mhm.
Valuing foolish things, because this is also what do you value in life, right? Because he talks about things like um what does he tell us to value? Eat, drinking, and our toil, enjoy, finding contentment and enjoyment in our toil. So yeah, I don't know, what were you thinking about, like what struck you when you were kind of looking at the thinking about memento mori, and or
Yeah. To
and for
explain that a
anybody
little
that
bit.
doesn't know kind of what that is, because I kind of
Right.
just jumped into it without explaining it.
Yeah, no, that's
Sorry
good.
about that.
Memento Mori is this name. It literally it means something like remembrance of death, or even maybe like I remember that I will die, is one way of more colloquially translating it. Like uh, it's it's the practice. It's a Christian practice, kind of an ancient Christian practice of just remembering that one day I'm gonna die. I can't stop that from happening, and I need to consider, therefore, what does that mean for me? What do I need to be thinking about and doing as someone whose death is inevitable, i.e., a human? And that helps us again make this distinction between these two messages from God, the law and the gospel. I may get that I'm supposed to be a good person, do good things throughout my life, but I will still die. That's still my problem. And when Solomon here talks about the day of death is better than the day of birth, it's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, for death is the destiny of everyone. I'm looking at the first few verses of this
Mm-hmm.
chapter. He says, the living should take this to heart. He's not saying that it's better to see someone die than to see someone born, but what he's saying is death is the end of the rat race here in life, the toil, the struggle of daily life. By faith, it's the reception of our soul into heaven, to sit at the wedding feast of the Lamb, and to await the resurrection from the dead and the world to come. That's what makes the day of death, as he says in verse 1, better than the day of birth. Um, we need the gospel as that other message from God to remind us of that, and well, or in the first place, to show us that the law is not God's only word, In fact, we need another word from God beyond the law to have any hope for eternity. Otherwise, death is a. You can't say the things that Solomon is saying here if this life is all that there is. Um,
Mhm.
well, maybe I guess you could if this life is all that there is. Well, okay, then it's over. But there isn't. There is a world after this. There are two destinations in that world. There is eternity with God in heaven, and there's separation from God forever in hell. And the day of death by faith is better than the day of birth. Uh,
Yeah, and I think later on too, Solomon kind of mentions this too. Like he's like he says something like enjoy. We're talking about the eating and drinking. He says, enjoy your time with your wife that God gives to you, and in eating and drinking and finding enjoyment in your toil, because when you go to Sheol, which is like the Hebrew kind of hell or underworld, there is no knowledge, there is no experience, there is none of these things. There is no pleasure, there is no enjoyment. So, maybe this kind of meaningless thing is that, hey, in the end, maybe there is nothing. And even if there is, people do kind of have this nihilistic view. You know, and this kind of brings me to the point I was thinking too. Like, I kind of, and he goes on about the last time we were talking about kind of like the stillborn thing. And here we're talking about death and birth and stuff. And, actually, I kind of disagree with him like really strongly on being like the stillborn. Like, I think like even like sometimes like there's things in my life that like just that one moment I was like it's like absolutely worth if I suffered every other minute of my life just to have that one moment like wow, oh that's beautiful, like I think would definitely be worth it. So
hmm.
um
Hmm.
you know so I think I kind of disagree with him on that, maybe a little strongly. Like it's totally worth living, even if you're going through, like you said, the rat race and the kind of struggle. Or last time I think we talked about Sisyphus, right, pushing the boulder up the hill and it coming down, and kind of that repetitive mindless, kind of draining task.
Hmm.
um is to just go out there and live and enjoy what you can. And he's not 100% fatalistic, because that is the ultimate message, is to enjoy those
Right.
basic things, right?
Yeah. I think I I don't think it's wrong, right? As a couple of Bible believing Christians, I don't think it's wrong to say that there are things in Ecclesiastes that we would disagree with that Solomon states, right? The way that we understand the doctrine of inspiration is not that like God came down and sort of everything that Solomon says here is necessarily um, absolutely true. He says things that we would disagree with, and that happens in other places too. There are times where, for instance, in the book of Job, like the friends might say something that we would, well, they do. Job's friends say things that we look at and we say, well, that's not right. But God inspired the recording of these words. Um, that's really the meaning of the doctrine of inspiration. God caused the writers to write down what he wanted written down.
Mhm.
And all of it is useful and profitable for us. But we take a look at sort of the totality of Scripture, and in portions like this, right, where Solomon is pretty honest with us that like this whole book chronicles his lifelong seeking for wisdom and his struggle with the things that he sees, the meaninglessness of life and the difficulties of life and the trials and tribulations. And he says things that, he maybe thought at one time or a thought that occurred to him, but it's not his ultimate take on the matter. It's not something that he even maybe stays with through the rest of a particular chapter. He tells us this was my impression at the time, but then I thought about it more. Yeah, we can disagree with some of Solomon's takes in Ecclesiastes,
Yeah.
something like, yeah, that the stillborn child is better off. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I understand what he means. Like we say, you're better off dead, or you're better off not knowing, better not even like I said with Job, we made that connection too, where it's like I
mhm.
was better off not even born. I wish I wasn't even born. So I think it's definitely, at least for me, I think it's definitely worth it, because life's a beautiful gift from God. Even if it's one that's filled with like what we might consider a lot of painful things. I think there's always, just having that gift alone is just a beautiful thing for me. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So
Well, that I think in a lot of ways covers memento mori. So
Yeah.
then there's a middle section which kind of talks about, I thought specifically verse 11 kind of sums up this middle section where it's that what are the benefits of wisdom? Um, in other portions of Ecclesiastes, Solomon talks about the wise man and the fool, they both die. Like you can be as wise as you want. And this is one of those, again, the distinction between law and gospel. Like be wise. Be wise is better. Wise won't save you. Um, but I don't know, like how Ian, how would you say like to someone then, like what's the benefit of being wise?
Wow. I don't know. I'm not really wise. I was a wise guy, but listen to no, I mean, I think the wisdom here and like, kind of going back a couple lines, let's look at 8. Like the end of a matter is better than the beginning, and patience is better than pride. Like I think that's a really wise saying. Because if you think like how many times in your life like you've been so nervous about something, like you have to do something and it's got to get done and you don't want to do it, but you like in your head maybe you try to convince yourself like, yeah, I'll do it, I'll be all right, but it's like you're just kind of freaking out before it happens, right? And this goes into the pride thing, because a lot of the times what happens, you get trapped in your head like, oh, I'm gonna mess up, this is gonna happen, you're always imagining the scenarios, but really like the end is better, because once it's over you're like, wow, that wasn't even that bad. What was I thinking? Why was I so upset? Why was I, kind of freaking out about it? Um, and that goes in again to the patience. So these like when you're talking about how does wisdom benefit us, is how to know to go in these situations, how to respond, and really kind of just being, like you said, patience over the pride, I think. Because again, my pride was always my big thing. And trying to, always be in control of everything. I think a lot of times, as he says in the next line, don't be quickly provoked. And this is not just anger, but this is like jumping to conclusions, assuming something about somebody, reading into something too much because of your own kind of, biases or, assumptions or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, yeah, knee
Knee
jerk.
jerk defensive kind of like,
Yeah.
somebody says something and you immediately have to take it like that's an attack. um
Yeah.
why'd you
It
say
probably
that? I
told, it
just don't
probably
understand.
told you the truth. I don't know. I find that sometimes, people tell you the truth. That's when people react the most.
Mm.
But yeah, so again, the one I really liked here, though, I really thought 7 was just great, because extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Like,
Mm.
how many people, especially in the United States, you see all the scandals now with like, politicians taking bribes. I always looked at a bribe as like something like, once you do it, like how like thin are you going to slice your soul, right? Because it's like, we say you sell your
Mm.
soul kind of when you take the bribe, but then it's like, okay, I took $1,000 my first time, then it's like, what are you worth? How much are you gonna, like what will you do? It's kind of the same thing of like, if you commit one lie, like how many more lies will you tell, and it will just keep getting kind of exponential in this.
Yeah.
um and then
I,
go ahead.
I just like the way that you said that, right? Like, what am I worth? That,
Yeah.
yeah, this, I shouldn't look at things. This is a good way to phrase this. If I'm being invited, right, by a bribe or by some other way to do something that goes against my conscience, I shouldn't look at the action itself as the thing that I'm sort of, well, is this worth it? Is
Mhm.
it worth compromising on this, this conviction? Is it worth, breaking this rule, this command, um, in this instance for whatever this other person is offering me or whatever I'm hoping benefit will bring? I should ask myself, am I worth that? Is that how little I think of myself? Solomon, right? He says a bribe corrupts the heart, and it
Yeah, the
changes who
most
we
important
are.
piece. Yeah, turns a wise person into a fool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that was really, that one kind of stood out for me, because I see it all the time. And like you say, you're selling your soul in little pieces. Then it's funny because you're taking money and you're getting richer in material wealth by getting the bribe or taking the bribe, but then on the opposite, you're cheaping the worth of yourself,
Yeah.
right? Because you're selling yourself, no better than a prostitute or something like that. Somebody that doesn't even care about their body, or so I think that was a really good one on that part. Um, but here's the
Yeah.
funny thing, like I didn't get this at all at the end where he's like, money, wisdom is a shelter, and money is a shelter.
Uh-huh.
Like, to me, I associate money with the fool, because like
Hmm.
it's a saying like a fool and his money are easily parted, something like that. Or people that I think, for me personally at least, maybe people that just always are seeking and going after wealth. So I kind of see them as foolish because they're looking at
Hmm.
something that's only a piece of like a shiny stone or something, as opposed to the real kind of deep
Well,
uh,
I
meaning or
think
value.
what you've got to look at, and I think you're pointing it out there, money needs to be understood as something that is a tool. It is
Hmm.
not an end in itself. It's a means to an end.
Hmm.
Um, money is not the thing in and of itself. Money, he says here, money is a shelter. All right. Well,
Hmm.
let's say you're out on a cold night, um, or let's say I'm traveling. So I drove to Virginia a couple weeks ago for a conference.
Hmm.
Let's say I broke down somewhere between here and Manassas, Virginia,
Hmm.
where I was. Um, I have a credit card that I with the ability to walk into the nearest hotel and just say what do you have vacant? Give me shelter. If I don't have that, I don't have that.
But then he says, what's the advantage of wisdom? Wisdom preserves you. So are
Hmm.
you only preserved for that night in the hotel? Like, once checkout time is over, you're not
Yeah,
preserved anymore, so you need
I
more
think
money.
right. Yeah, I think the thought here is this, and I've got some comments later in this section. This is
Sure.
the Hebrew here is tricky in getting across the thoughts. But I think
Hmm.
what he's meaning to get across in 12 is that wisdom you can't run out of wisdom.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
run
that's
out of
kind of what I
money.
was saying. It's not
Yeah, you
so. It's like
can
the
run out of
infinite
money.
versus the finite. Again, we're talking
Hmm.
about memento mori, the finiteness of life. We're kind of talking about in this, but also kind of like the constant circles and infinite, if you want to kind of say, of like cycles of nature and life and stuff like that that are always going on. Okay, I see what
Yeah.
you mean there. That makes more sense.
Yeah, the superiority of wisdom to money, I think,
Yeah,
is being emphasized here, where they both can serve the same ends, right?
yeah.
Ultimately, they can serve us helpfully in this life, for our bodily needs,
Mhm.
wisdom and money. But I can never, my wallet will never run out of wisdom. I might
Yeah.
reach in there and like a cartoon, think about a cartoon. You open up your wallet and a little dust ball kind of
Oh
out.
yeah,
The
like the
guy's like,
moths.
oh no. Um, but
Yeah,
wisdom, I've always got that. I can
yeah.
always, yeah. But that verse, it is a tricky verse. And if there's do you mind if I move us down into that kind of third section, the pragmatic, the where he talks about kind of don't go to one side or the other. He talks about different kind of
Sure, yeah.
extremes.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a yeah, there's a couple of spots in your English Bibles here. If you're reading the NIV, if you're reading the NIV 1984, so I've got a 1984 physical copy in front of me, and then on my screen up here, I've got the 2011 NIV. The 1984 did something helpful. So at verses 18 and then also 28, it put these little square brackets around a couple of words that are not there in the Hebrew. It's the English translators trying to bring across what they think the meaning of the verse is into English, by inserting a word.
Mhm.
So verse 18 says, "It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes." But the word extremes is not there in Hebrew. Um, and there's a footnote, if you notice, in your English Bibles. It should be in just about any English Bible. It says something like, "will follow them both." So the thought here is, again, to be pragmatic, to not be maybe too ideological. We'll get into, I think, what this verse is saying, but just to note, like the word extremes is not there in Hebrew. Likewise, and this is a really interesting one. I think this is a hard verse to understand. Verse 28, Solomon's talking about, while I was still searching but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all. NIV 84 again, square brackets, the word upright both times. The Hebrew does not have really anything there. It just says, I found one man among 1,000, but not one woman among them all. And I don't know, it's an odd verse in general, what exactly he's saying, and then it's made more odd by the either inclusion or realization of the omission of this word upright.
That's kind of interesting, because I was looking at that, and I looked at that end part there. Really, God created mankind upright, but they have gone in search of many schemes. I mean, that's the fall right there. That's creation, in the
Yeah,
beginning that he's talking about, right? We were created upright, and then we searched many schemes, our own schemes. We had not just that, but everything that came after that. That moment when we decided to define ourselves instead of doing our our God-given role instead. So that's what I see right there. That's just like right there.
yeah.
Like,
And
so
then I think
it's like, yeah.
and I think that's what generally the understanding of this verse is. And so the word upright then is kind of brought up into 28
Mhm.
um, to show that interpretive connection with 29. Um, let's take a look at the section kind of overall, maybe, and talk about this idea of kind of be pragmatic, um,
Mhm.
and then we can maybe talk some of those more specifics. But I would say this last section starts at 15 in this meaningless again. There's that word life of mine.
Sure.
I have seen both of these, the righteous perishing in their righteousness, and the wicked living long in their wickedness. And then he's got some counsel for us. Um, Solomon says, "This is what you should do on the basis of what I've observed. Don't be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It's good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes." Or the maybe a closer translation of the Hebrew there would be that idea: whoever fears God will follow them both. Um,
So is he saying like he'd follow 16 and 17
yeah,
to
yeah,
over righteous, over wicked?
yeah.
So
It's that. So 16 is what does it mean to be over righteous?
I think of like self-righteous,
Yes.
as opposed to over-righteous. Like, like I'm the best, I'm the greatest. Look at all the things I do. Like I had
Hmm.
a really funny experience a couple months ago. Um, I went to return the recycling at the supermarket. So I returned all the stuff, and I have a bag with all like the metal cans and stuff that they wouldn't take. So I went to go throw it in the garbage, and what it was is they didn't have a garbage pail in the recycling area, so I brought it back to the car. And as I'm putting it in the trunk, some guy drives up to me and he's like, "Hey, you could give that to that old lady over there. I just gave all my cans." And I was like, "Nah, these are garbage, man." And I just threw him in the thing, and he drove off. I was like, "Man, that guy was like just so self-righteous. He had to just tell somebody. Like he couldn't have just gave the cans to the lady and then just disappeared. Went on his way. Like, you should. That's what I would have done. I would have just gave it to her, said, "Oh yeah, just no problem. See you later." You know, and then like the masked man, right, just vanish into the sunset. No, but he had to like tell the first person that he saw and try to make me feel bad. So that's what I kind of think, like over righteous, always trying to show other people how great you are.
Yes, that's I think exactly what it is. The display of your righteousness.
Yeah. And then we get to, I always talk about the performative, and that's our society now. It's always performing, virtue signaling, right? If you ever heard that word, that's kind of like the modern version of being over righteous. You're always acting and pretending and putting on this kind of persona or facade that you're, this great, righteous, upright, you're the person, what is it, like the Pharisee and the tax collector, right? Like that parable. That's the Pharisee there saying, "Oh, look at me. I'm not like those other sinners," kind of thing. So, uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think about topical um, this. this recording should come out this week. In fact, we're recording shortly before Halloween here in the U.S. And yeah, ooh. I run into more and more, and it wasn't a thing, at least not that I recall running into as much when I was a kid. I know it was out there, but in particular, Christians who, for some proper reasons, are really troubled by some of the cultural practices of Halloween. And I'll say on the one hand, I get it. I when I drive around, and I see these 9 foot skeletons on people's lawns with like
Oh,
the
that's
flaming,
cool.
flashing eyes and stuff. And kids, like, 9-year-old kids running around with like the scream mask and a knife. Like, I like that. But I think then I run into a lot of people who say, yeah, and my kids do not trick or treat. We stay in and we like pray.
I don't know which one's worse, man.
Your kid, well,
Probably staying
there's,
home praying, man. You get
yeah,
traumatized.
like, sure, go for it.
You would kind of resent, like you would associate like praying with like having a bad time.
Exactly. And that's the end of 16 there. It asks the question, why destroy yourself? Like,
Yeah,
I talked to someone who in fact like their kids really resent this fact that they were never allowed to do this, and it was like battles with their spouse
yeah,
over the fact like you're destroying yourself. Like, let your kid, sure, set some boundaries. We're not going to put a giant skeleton on our lawn. You're not going to dress up as like a demon or something like
yeah,
that. You're going to be a Disney princess, or you're going to be Luke Skywalker, or you're going to be a construction worker, whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah,
then go get some candy. Don't be over righteous, neither be over wise. And I think in particular with that idea of over wise, of the people who are going to print out like a 3-page history of Halloween and its connection to Samhain and its
yeah.
the pagan past. Great, you're very wise. You know a lot, but you're destroying yourself.
No, they
You're
didn't. They don't know a lot. They just looked it up on Wikipedia.
Yeah. The second verse here, 17, do not be over wicked. This I think is an interesting one. Like, oh, is it okay for me to be a little wicked then?
Yeah, no, it's
Like,
fine. Well,
um,
well, that's the problem is that like, I always think about people, and that's why I love being a Lutheran is the whole kind of like saint sinner thing all the time.
yeah,
Because it's so liberating because like you're gonna sin. Like it's inevitable. It's gonna happen. Even if you're the most devout Christian on the planet, you're always everybody's gonna sin. The prophets, Moses, all those guys, that we revere, they were sinners too. So people kind of get so obsessed with that, and they're always like, oh, even like one slip up, then at least if at least I'm sinning like once in a while, I know I'm still human, right? Like that's still normal.
uh-huh,
But then it also, I think awareness of that kind of like gives you a sense of like humility, right? Like, yeah, I'm a sinner too. I'm not better than anybody else. We're all
yeah,
sinners. So like you can kind of see on the level. And that's what he's talking here with the balance, right? You'll go after both because the two extremes, even though like you said it doesn't say in the Hebrew, but if you want to take that, those two extremes, they come together and then they kind of equal each other out. Like the two equal forces make this kind of middle ground here, which is where
hmm
his wisdom, with the wisdom that he's trying to explain to us, pass on to us, really, um,
yeah.
is it lies where it lies.
There's a great book by a now sainted Wisconsin Synod theologian, Daniel Deutschlander. It's on my bookshelf. If you're somebody who comes to
Oh,
this church or would at some point come to this church, highly recommend asking if you can borrow it, and I'll certainly let you. I'll just bug you to make sure that I get it back one day.
yeah,
Uh,
right.
the book is called The Narrow Lutheran Middle by Dan Deutschlander, and it just on the one hand, what we're what we would be saying is not like the answer to every question is always in the middle of the two options that are presented to you, right? Like as if every single time, you know, example, um, you're hanging out with your friends and somebody offers you um, cocaine and somebody offers you uh, meth, and you're like, well, I'll just take a little bit of this one and a little bit of that one. The narrow Lutheran middle says that, but that very often, as you pointed out, Ian, Lutheran theology, with our focus on the simile justificator, is going to find a middle ground between theological positions, between practical positions. So, like, one of the things he talks about in our sacramental theology, you've got on the one side maybe the Roman Catholic position of transubstantiation, where the bread and wine literally becomes in like physical form the body and blood of Christ, and on the other side, in like Anabaptist circles, a doctrine of representation, where Baptists, non-denominationals, are going to say things like, the bread and wine represent, or maybe more so, the crackers and grape juice represent the body and blood of Christ. And the Lutheran position is in the middle of those two, where we're going to say, no, this is bread and wine, and it remains bread and wine. But with this bread and wine, we receive the body and blood of our Lord and Savior.
Yeah, I mean I think that one kind of makes sense. Like, just thinking about it, because like, if you think about the Last Supper, he's handing out bread and wine. It's like
Yeah.
he's not saying this changed into my blood and into my body shed for you, right? He's saying it like, hey, this is, So I mean, I definitely believe the true presence, because I smile like a fool every time Jesus is around. So
Which I love.
yeah, I know. And sometimes like I'll just be thinking about it. I was doing the dishes the other day and I just started thinking about Jesus and I just couldn't stop smiling. So it's not always, that's how I know it's legit, that he's there. So it's cool, man. It's cool. It's like I said, what did Paul say? And there's nothing better than the unsurpassing joy of knowing Lord Christ Jesus. It is definitely true. But just kind of hit home on what we're saying here, kind of nail it home, if you will, since it is Reformation Day coming up.
I like that.
Even Solomon agrees with us right here, right? Indeed, there is no one on earth who is righteous, no one who does what is right and never sins.
Yes, I'm glad you pointed it out. With what you were saying earlier, I wanted to go to that verse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. And he follows it up really well in 21 right here. Do not pay attention to every word people say. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's also like paying attention in your head to what you think people are saying about you when you're not there too. Because like he said, if you're always listening for it, you'll hear it. You'll hear somebody saying bad things. And it doesn't always have to be about you, right? And hearing about your opinions or being heard or anything. The actual point he's trying to make here is like, don't be a hypocrite. Like, you curse other people, so why would you be upset other people curse you? Like, yeah, you can say all these terrible things about somebody, but the second somebody barely even says one thing about you, like, how dare you?
Yes.
Right? That kind of attitude he's trying to squash right there, saying, no, we're all sinners. All right. So like, you're gonna curse other people, just people have cursed you. Like, get over it, move on, kind of attitude, right?
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's not a bad way to express what it is that we believe in terms of what forgiveness is. It is to recognize I'm a sinner, you're a sinner, you've wronged me, I have or will probably wrong you at some point. Yeah. If anybody who you're in like an ongoing relational capacity with, they'll wrong you, you'll wrong them, it'll happen. We forgive, we move on.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the whole experience, is forgiveness. We are freely given, freely forgive, right? So
that might be the best. I think maybe that's as you just said, Ian, as we've been forgiven, we forgive, we freely forgive. That might be the wisest thing that we can say to wrap up our discussion on wisdom today. Ian, any last comment for the folks?
No, I really like this one. There was a couple other things real quick in here. We went over everything that I had. The only thing I was going to mention is that, I lived in Japan, so I'll give you my little Japanese cultural tidbit about memento mori. So in Japanese culture, there's something called mono no oware, which literally translates to like the pathos of things. So pathos is kind of like, the kind of meaning, kind of like a mournful understanding. So it's very similar. So it's this kind of concept like where I feel like memento mori, as we think as Christians or in the West, as like a very active thing, as you mentioned before. Like Japanese culture, it's extremely passive. It's kind of like the passive acknowledgement that everything is ephemeral and temporal and fleeting, and then like the fleeting of the moment is what makes it beautiful and that kind of thing. So I thought of that because then it reminds me of Havel with the vapor and the wind, and
Yeah.
the image of Mono no Aware is like the cherry blossom blowing in the wind, right? Like, because the tree blossoms very quickly, and as quickly as it blossoms, the leaves are blown within like a month or so. So that's kind of a metaphor for life, and how the transient nature. So it really made me think of this too. It was kind of interesting to see how, like, kind of far these cultures apart are, but as God kind of gives us all these little clues. um so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, I mean, don't be a fool. Be a fool
Don't
like
be a fool.
me. See, I'm the cool fool. No,
Yeah.
but
Be a fool. Be a fool for the gospel. There we go.
yeah, fool for
Oh, we laid
Christ.
on.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And this is the foolishness of the gospel, that we forgive, right? We don't hold grudges. Um, we don't take revenge on wrongs done to us. We forgive. That's the thing that really makes, by the laws of the world, like, that's dumb. Why would
Mhm.
you not? Why would you not hold a grudge? Why wouldn't you try and get revenge? But no, instead we forgive. We are in that sense fools under the gospel, fools for Christ.
Yeah,
Well, thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us on Ecclesiastes
thank
chapter
you.
7 this week. And if you're out trick or treating, just remember, don't be over righteous or over wicked.
Yeah, and I'll be checking out those 9-foot skeletons because I like that kind of stuff. So, on that note, grace and peace be with you.
Yeah. Thank you, friends. Take
Thank
care.
you. Until next time.